Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What is tonight? It is Monday night, and Monday night is Couch Conversations. So, we are here tonight to get ready and get started. We're going to go around the panel as we always do, and we're going to introduce our esteemed panelists who are here with us on this evening, starting with the man who says that I threaten him to be here on Monday nights, but he's always here and he's on time. That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller.
Good evening, everybody. And Nikki, thanks for having me on this panel. And it's been such a inspiration as well as a learning experience because we all every we can look at a lot of different individuals and situations, and we can all learn from those. And the fact is, I guess when we stop learning, life almost is about to end. So learning is an important part of my life, and just to learn about solutions and even to learn and define some problems that we might not have looked at the same as we looked at years ago. We sometimes we have to relook at it and see get a new from a new vantage point. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm a retired internist. I retired in 2019, and my interest is still in healing the community and preventing diseases.
No such thing as retirement. To the doctor that's known on the streets as Dr. 100 because she keeps it so real, that's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green? And it appears that Dr. Green may be a little frozen, so we'll come right back. Oh, there she is, Dr. Green.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me, Nikki. Thank you to Congressman Davis, and congratulations to Congressman Davis, and congratulations to our community for holding up our elected officials that make decisions in favor of our communities. I always say, when we elect officials, you elect the ones that support you, and you don't elect the ones that don't. So I'm glad to see our community standing together in that. Hope that was okay for me to say, but it's already said if it wasn't, so okay. Thank you, Nikki.
Want to say hey to Connie Taylor, who is here with us. She says, good evening to everyone. To my colleague who tends to leave us and go and have fun in the sun, but he finds his way back to Chicago every now and then. That's our very own Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm also a retired physician like Dr. Miller. I spent 30 years working in the western suburbs of Chicago as a specialist. I then spent 2 years in the congressman's office in Washington, D.C. I just want to echo what Dr. Maya said, is that if you've been inside this office, it's hard to imagine anybody else working as hard and as long, and his staff working as hard as long for his community. So I'm into the election results. I'm here to answer your questions as best I can. It's an honor to be here.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to that infamous physician who is the doctor by day and the DJ by night. That's our very own Dr. Pete. Dr. Pete Thomas.
Hey, Nikki. Again, thank you for this forum. For you and the congressman, congratulations, Congressman Davis. Again, your work for the community is just unprecedented, and we appreciate you. And also, I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight, and hopefully get our community a little bit more information to make better decisions.
Outstanding. Well, the congressman will be signing on shortly. And while he's getting everything, finishing up a meeting and getting ready to get started, Dr. Miller, why don't you start our conversation?
Dr. Miller, you're on mute.
Yeah. This evening we want to look at a different, well, I won't say a different kind, but a health issues that is affecting a lot of the young of our community. And to the point that the number one cause of death in that age group between the ages of 17 and 35 is homicide. So what I'm looking at, what we want to discuss this evening is violence and youth violence, or violence against youth. And to look at to examine this issue in terms of what are some of the possible causes, what it is that we as a community can do to improve the situation, and how we can solve some of the problems that are leading to violence, and really figure out better ways to resolve our differences and the issues that we have with one another. Um, you know, as we sort of have, been trained to look and find to seek the problems and to try to find the answers to the problem, oftentimes the answers are a lot different than what we can hear when we look at the high blood pressure, we look at diabetes, and we look at those things where we have some tangible things that we can measure, and it says, yes, this is a problem, and now we have some possible solution. But these are things that are functional. They are continually um, ongoing processes. And so we're going to have a discussion about youth violence and some of the results of these violent behavior, and what can we do to try to find some solutions to changing these kinds of things in our community. So I want to just open that up, and I can see Dr. Maya I think that you're always into dealing with the community, and this is a broken part of the community that we need to look at. How can we fix this broken limb, I'm going to call it. But Dr. Maya, can you weigh in
Yeah,
on this? Mm-hmm.
sure. Immediately that takes my mind to a scale called adverse childhood experiences. And it's basically a 10 question scale that talks about things impacting our environment, social determinants of health, the way structure is set up for us, some of the biases that plague our community. And, I'm going to make space. I also want to, it takes me back to that book by Daniel Dawes, Political Determinants of Health, where he starts with kind of an example of an orchard, and you take apple seed from the same apple, two different apple seeds. You plant one where the ground is fertile, the sun is shining, and there are already trees growing up. Right. So in that orchard, you already know the likelihood of this seed sprouting and turning into a full tree is there for many reasons. The ground has the nutrients, the weather is right, and you have the example of the other trees around it. So you know what this ground can do. You take that other seed, you plant it in a place, the ground doesn't have the right nutrients to grow an apple seed. The weather is not right, or there's something blocking the water from getting there. And every living thing, like every plant life example on that ground, has withered away. You plant both, same day. You do the same thing to them. It rains on both, except one of them has something preventing the rain from getting to the ground. The sun shines on both, except that same canopy that's stopping the sun from getting to the seed stopping the rain is stopping the sun from getting where it needs. And the ground is not the same that you planted it in. Then you come back and you're like super surprised that the place where you planted it on ground that's not fertile is not growing, right? So then you say, oh, look, this one is growing. Let me give this some more fertilizer in the place where it's growing, right? And then we wonder what happened. Well, Daniel Dawes starts that book out talking about that, and talking about how our surroundings, a lot of times we have to get involved and with our legislators, things like that in the discussion. But we also have, also in things like determining how much green life is around us, determining, calling in when the garbage doesn't get picked up. We also have to protect our tribe in that way, right? Even in medicine, making sure the people directly in my community get the vaccinations they need, things like that, to make my community that fertile ground. And when we see things that indicate our community ground is not fertile, we are moving into that farming place where we are, making the moves we need to make. Well, adverse childhood experiences, what does that have to do with what we were talking about, Dr. Miller's? But yes, adverse child experiences talk about whether or not you've seen a relative incarcerated, whether or not you got food when you needed to, whether or not you saw your mom verbally, physically abused, whether or not you experienced physical, sexual, verbal abuse, whether or not you were fully able to express your feelings. Adverse child, and so on and so on and so on. It's about 10 of them. They're also called ACEs, capital A, capital C, capital E, and then small s, ACEs. And so look them up. I recently started at every talk I do in the community, putting those questions up there, and if people feel so inclined, they don't have to raise their hand. They can or they don't. They can count in their head, and looking at, literature that shows that 4 or more of those greatly put our communities or greatly put our youth at risk for, future violence, substance use, all those things, because now that same dry land that was not fertile, there's all kinds of ways of being angry, trying to escape it, things like that. And then pumped into some neighborhoods are avenues for escape that are not so healthy, like drugs, guns, things like that. So adverse child, I said all that to say, adverse childhood experiences are, so what can we do about it? We have to be very, very intentional about protecting our youth when we see them. They don't have to be my kids, there I have to think every kid in my surrounding is my kid. I'm responsible for them, and I'm responsible for the impact, that the environment has on our youth. That's where it starts, when they're babies, when they're 4, all that time. That's where it starts. It doesn't start when they're 17. Their acts of violence or thoughts or suggestions in the music, all that stuff being pumped into the neighborhood. That's not when it started. It started when they were a baby. It started when they were 3, 4, 5, experiencing adverse childhood experiences. Look it up, and you don't need to be an expert to do something about it. You need to be a person in that child's community, a supportive person, and a person that votes.
Yeah, as you talk about that, and again, we talk about the brokenness. I'm reminded of relationships. When relationships get fractured, it usually create trauma. You create pain. Somebody is, there's some suffering that occurs in this process, and so if there's a breaking up of family, if there's a suffering or there's a neglect or a abuse within that family, that is it may just occur between 2 people, but it affects many people, and so those are some things that we have to really look at when we see the problems occurring. Not to look at the symptoms of the problem, but as you say, look at what Dr. Meyer is talking about, the causes. Because if we're talking about trying to find a solution, we must begin to deal with what is causing the problem, and then from there we might be able to change it. Dr. Pete, you want to?
Yeah, I think this is a very important topic, and I completely agree with Dr. Maya that our children's experiences very young will dictate their health outcomes. The data is very clear about it. And what also comes to mind when I think about ACEs and ACE scores is the mental health of our kids. And there's some statistics to state that we're seeing a decline in suicide rates amongst every community, with the exception of Black men. Black men are having increased suicide rates, some as high as 73% rates of suicide attempts. And so I think we have to, one, get rid of this myth that Black people don't have depression, don't have anxiety, don't have trauma, and that we don't act on those and commit suicide. We have to get rid of that myth This other thing about that we're so resilient, right? And people say this about Black women too much too. They're so resilient. They're so resilient. And while you may be resilient, it creates a false sense of, you got this, and nobody comes to your rescue. Nobody says, "Oh, Dr. Maya, she got it. Don't worry about her." And then all of a sudden we hear something and we say we should have did something. Well, we can't take that for granted anymore. The data is there. The CDC is telling us Black men are killing themselves, highest rate among all other communities. What are we going to do about it? Now, those symptoms come out in different ways. We're taught in medical school these sort of classic symptoms for depression. Someone sleeps a lot, someone's not eating, and they become isolated. But sometimes with Black men, they can put themselves in harm's way, right? By doing very sort of risky, reckless things. And that's basically a suicide attempt, okay? By, I don't know, you get pulled over by the police and then you don't open up the door or whatever they tell you to do. It's little things like that. And I don't think it's a blatant thing. It's a anxiety. The world is coming, it's crashing down on me. I don't have a job. I can't make my family proud of me. I can't take care of my baby. And all this is coming down. And then here comes the police stop, right? And my tail lights out. And now, instead of acting in a rational way to save their life, they act in a very irrational way and eventually, could very well take their life in that instance. All I'm saying is we got to pay attention to mental health. We need services for the Black and brown communities, right? But at the same time that I say this, we know there's a mental health shortage. There's not enough people in mental health, and certainly not enough people of color in mental health. It's at the point now where I'm not looking for people. I'm looking for anybody who can take my patients, right? I write so many referrals for mental health, and people are shocked. My patients look at me like, "You think I'm crazy, Dr. Thomas?" I said, "No, you ain't crazy." I said, "But we all get to the point where, enough is enough. How much can you burden? How much can you take before someone says, 'Hey, you need help'? The same way with that blood pressure go up, and I can give you a blood pressure medicine. I need to put you in the hands of a mental health specialist, and it doesn't necessarily mean medication. It could mean medication." But it could just mean having some couch therapy, being able to talk this thing through. And if our adults can't do that, then certainly our kids are not equipped to be in tune with their emotions and their trauma to understand that they need our help.
I can tell you what we're doing about it. Last week, I asked the very same question, Dr. Miller, to Javier Becerra, who is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And I asked the question in the context, and we were talking medicine, in the context that President Biden, the week before, had just met with a group of police chiefs about violence. And Javier, of course, answered that violence is indeed a part of healthcare need in terms of the need to deal with it. We did vote a new budget in. We finally got a budget that's going to carry us all the way up to the end of the fiscal year. That would be to the end of September. There is increasingly awareness and interest in mental health coming from the Biden administration. And of course, we never get enough money to deal with whatever it is that we're talking about dealing with, especially at a time when our government is constantly in a state of flux. And there's always the notion that something is going to occur that will distract us from dealing with the real issues. For example, we may end up voting on another speaker coming up because the Republicans can't seem to agree to keep a speaker that long. I mean, and so the die is kind of cast. But I do want to take a moment to thank all of our viewers and thank all of you for giving me an opportunity to spend another 2 years after this year working on these issues at the highest level of activity that we have in this country, and that is in the United States House of Representatives and in the Senate. And I make a plea that all who believe that we need to increase activity relative to mental health, make sure that you help us get there. And you know, I always say that you're healthy when not only do you live a certain length of time and you're well, but that you also fulfill your social role obligations to the expectation of others. That is to say, other people expect you to be involved in problem solving, which means that you cannot decide which way things will go. And so that's about all I'll say about that at the moment. But let me thank all of you for not only being with us this evening, but for being with us down through the year. And I know I've been kind of absent 2 or 3 weeks, but absent, engaged in trying to make sure that we have the environment that will be most productive in terms of dealing with the problem. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Miller. We appreciated seeing you out on the trail when I was out there in your neighborhood. All of that. All is well that ends well. And even though it looks tough, I think we're going to be all right.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Like Doug to Dr. Graham to touch weigh in on perspective in terms of looking at things that help to create a healthy environment for young people and create also an expectation of excellence. If you can sort of give us some background or some understanding, your understanding of that, Dr. Graham.
Well, I think it's a lot like Dr. Murphy said, that if you are in an orchard where you have good soil and good water and good sun and good fertilizer, and somebody pays attention to the things that are bad for the trees and gets them out of there, it's easier for the tree to grow. And so I think about this in terms of, do you have an opportunity for good education? Do you have opportunities for good recreation? Are you supported by loving parents? Are you supported by other organizations that provide you with support, attention, examples of what you can do and can accomplish? And is there hope? Because that's kind of the thing that I'm most concerned about is if you're in a situation where it's a bad orchard and there's no escape and things are getting worse, it's hard not to imagine that being an absolute perfect kitchen for violence.
Yeah,
You know, I
that's
sometimes wonder. I was at church yesterday, and there were only about 10, 11,000 people there. I was at Reverend John Hanna's church, and he had his 20th year anniversary. It was at the UIC Pavilion. And I was just sitting there amazed as these people kept coming in. And I was wondering what kind of organizing, whatever it is that he does to get 10, 11,000 people at church on a Sunday morning. And I tell you, it was some kind of church. It was very inspirational. And so I'm wondering if we ought to start spending as much time organizing people as we spend on the content of what we're going to be dealing with. And if we can get the people where they can experience the content, that may help us a great deal to get more engagement. But I was tremendously impressed. I think I started shouting about halfway and shouted the rest of the day.
Well, I think that organization is really a big key in terms of how we what can be done. Because again, the village has to be whole. We have to, if I just remember back, when I was growing up, that there was a connection. Um, people felt some kindred to one another, neighbors, and even people that didn't wasn't necessarily live that close to them. They felt this connection, and they also felt not only the connection but some sense of responsibility to help each other, and whatever the task was, whether there was something difficult, whether somebody was having some trouble. Even I remembered, even when a loved one was lost in a family, that the people in the community came together um, to spend time and to even just to do the work, so that the mourning individuals did not have to be busy doing the other things that needed to be done in order to prepare for the service and whatever else that was going on. But they had time to spend with the mourning process. And these are the kinds of things that are so important in terms of the whole. And to some extent, I don't know if that's something that is organized, or if that's just something that's just growing together as a community, or whatever it is. It is something that we need to try to. I think that if we can bring some of that back together, that we can get to know each other better, get to have a better sense of caring for one another. We feel each other pain and suffering, and it affects us in a way that won't let us be at ease. And at the same time, we feel their joy, that we rejoice when we see that there's happiness, there's progress, there is success. And those are the kinds of things that we have to figure out. How do we bring that back? But Dr. Pete, you want to chime in on it? How do we bring that kind of thing back, where we feel each other pain, but we also rejoice with each other when there's success? Pete frozen.
Well, while Dr. Pete is trying to get unfrozen, I want to say hey to Jacqueline Morris, who's here. She says, good evening to everyone. Nellie Purnell is here. And she says, good evening to everyone. That's Nellie Purnell King. Virginia Knight is here, and she says, good evening. Claude Robinson is here, and he says, congratulations on your re-election, Congressman. He's also saying, what's up? Jeff Gerloff is here, and he says, hello, Congressman and the team of doctors. Jacqueline, I'm sorry, lost my place for a second. Jacqueline Morris says, Black men are under silent pressure. And Claude also says, I'm sorry, Springdale Scott says, hello, I am always glad to listen to this podcast. He then shared a link that was sent to us by Dr. Maya that we shared. And then we have Jackie Robinson Ivy here just as well, and she's saying hello. Springdale also says that she is very glad that we voted you back into office. With all of the experience, I would not miss that vote also. Claude is also saying hi to Dr. Maya. And Jacqueline Moore says organizing. Yes, organizing. And Melissa Maxwell is here. She says, yes, this world is so divided now. We used to be like a family. Pete, did you get yourself unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Dr. Miller. I think we need to rely on, and much like the congressman said, rely on our traditional resources. So the church has always been a foundation that has been pivotal for us making it through, right? So we got to get the church. I think maybe COVID has separated us a little bit, but we got to get the church back involved in the community, like actively in the community. And certainly, we know that from a faith-based perspective, there's a lot of prayer happening. But I mean, real, like having counseling sessions or counselors available at the church. Not to say God can't do it. God can do it through that therapist too, right? We know he can do it, but he can also do it by you going to see a therapist. Okay. The other thing is, I think fraternities and sororities. I know for the alphas, we have a alpha like program. I think all of them need to be way more robust. Our kids are hurting, and it's not enough of us. And I also think we have to stop doing stuff in silos. Like we need to do stuff together. Certainly, you can keep your individual projects because people are very vested in those. But we need to do stuff together. The Kappas and Alphas and the Qs and everybody. We have to do things together. Also partnering with other organizations, particularly organizations that benefit from us. So like a lot of these shoe companies, Nike and Adidas, all of them, they wouldn't make it if it wasn't for us because of our style and our swag and everything. So they should invest back with the community to keep some of these kids alive. I mean, literally, there's no way there's been a 73% increase in suicide attempts among young Black men. And nobody said anything except for the CDC, but that's wonderful. But I mean, Nike, you don't have nothing to say. You know what I mean? Like, let's put some effort, and you can partner with people. You don't have to do the heavy lifting. You can partner with a church. You can partner with the alphas. You can partner with various organizations to help put together programs. And all of these, mind you, right? Just like Maya said with the H scores, they won't necessarily solve the problem, right? But it becomes a little bit of a band-aid so we can stop the bleeding, right? Because at some point, yes, we got to go to the source of the problem, which means a lot of the households that these kids are coming from, right, are not whole. In any way you want to imagine, they're not whole. Not just as in the fathers aren't there, which is pivotal, right? But also just in the fact of unadulterated love being there, right, for these kids. And I run into kids all the time, and you can tell like many of them have not had a positive interaction with Black men. And and so sometimes I will make myself available, and people know they're Black medical students that have rotated with me. I don't tell Black medical students they can't rotate with me. If you want to come and rotate with me, you got time, I got time. Because there's not enough of us that's pouring into them. It's not enough of me and Dr. Maya and Dr. Graham and Dr. Miller. There ain't enough of us. So when they ask to come, you got to say yes. And then my charge to them is, all I ask you to do is do the same for someone behind you. Because I know the struggle and how hard it took for you to get there. I was proud of one of my mentees just matched in emergency medicine. And this young man had a young son in medical school. So I was so happy for him. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is just that we do have to look at traditional resources in our community that we've always depended on. I mean, that's why all the fraternities and sororities were founded, was because of that need. And so now more than ever, we got to retool, work together, because the enemy is still there. The boogeyman ain't went no place. All right, he look a little different, right? And so the point I'm trying to make is just that we gotta work together. We gotta pull on resources, particularly resources that benefit off of our culture. And so I'm definitely I can't help but to be an optimist, because what are our options, right? Because there has to be a future pipeline of young doctors and attorneys that are coming behind us. And so we got to pour into them, and we can't give up on them, right? But I do think we got to start earlier. We got to start earlier, right? Way earlier. And I would even say, I don't know, I'm not a family medicine doctor or a pediatrician, but I would almost say the same way we have to fill out those forms for kids to get to school, every kid ought to have a mental health evaluation and take those ACE scores, right? I know that's the last thing a primary care doctor want to see is another form for us to fill out, but have those forms be required so that at least we know what our kids need. We know what they need coming in. This kid is in trouble.
Yeah.
Doesn't the school principal need those too? I mean, if you've got a kid in school who's not learning, who's causing trouble, don't you need to run on that home so that you can do something that'll be productive rather than isolate and punish that kid, which will only make things worse?
Plus, if you
Underscoring what
then who you might run into. Like I ran into Jackie Ivy and her son last Sunday, Trevor. They were at church. So Jackie, it was good seeing you and Trevor.
Underscoring what everyone is saying, there's an African proverb that says, a child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think, sometimes I would say we as adults have so much going on and so much going on in the world. We, a lot of times, we saw it in COVID, didn't take time to figure out how that was impacting our children. And then afterwards, because, we were like, they don't understand, afterwards studies show they actually did understand. They actually were in fear and looked for escapes just like a lot of us did, and then making sure that when we take those ACEs, we have plans to do something about it, right? If we don't want, so going back to what we started with, there is a link between poverty and violence. There are books about it, articles about it, terms about it. They call it the locust effect. Poverty and violence are linked, so it's one thing to say, like, where is all this coming from? It's another thing to go back to those orchards and the landscape that we're creating and be able to see the direct connection between the landscape we created with zero, little access to nutrition, also called food apartheid, with, less access to quality tools for education. We won't say quality educators because you can put the educators. We have some excellent educators a lot of times in the schools. I remember when I was a teacher, this was way, no school calling out. The school I'm talking about is closed now. I walked in, the students didn't have any books because there was no, like things like that. Employment for the parents so they can get the tools. All these things I'm talking about go on this scale called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And poverty, essentially, y'all heard me say this when I first joined, poverty is a strategic form of oppression. That's what it is, and when you put people in there and it looks like when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, water, shelter, those things, as you take those away, that's what, or you take away the quality of it, right? You can say, oh, you got a restaurant in your neighborhood and it's a joint that doesn't serve nutritious foods, healthy foods, things like that. And you can take those away and say, like, why is this happening? That's what poverty looks like. You take away the education, take away the food, take away, and now we're back in that orchard called poverty, right? Then there's a direct link between all of that. Someone's trying to get the means to get the food. It's a natural instinct, or escape. The whole thing, a lot of times that's where substance use comes in. But I want to get the means to get the food. I have to get money. I have to get, things like that. And then we step back and say, oh, I don't know why this person is doing it. We don't need another study. Literature shows exactly why this is happening. Now, What are we doing about it? I will go back to Congressman. You weren't on when I was saying it, but I was saying it because it's true. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to our community. For making sure we're putting in place legislators that are infusing equity into our neighborhoods. I'm not talking about, some dream that somebody sold me on, a country and I'm going to vote like I'm white and rich. You know what I'm saying? Because there are plenty of white people that are not rich. I'm talking about the dream that people sell to vote like they're white and rich. I'm not doing that. I'm talking about legislators that know what's going on in my neighborhood and are making decisions to impact my neighborhood versus trying to make decisions to impact and improve someone else. So congratulations, Congressman. I always say we vote in people that when it's time for you to vote, you said you was missing for 2 to 3 weeks. Well, you was right with us. You was doing the vote. You were voting for me in my neighborhood. And so we're glad we were voting for you, period. You know, so congratulations on that. So what do you do about adverse childhood? What do you do about changing the narrative on which neighborhoods are impoverished? You get involved, you vote. Not only that, you get involved where you can with education of our children. You get involved with allowing, and the impact. What does your outside, your house look like? Things like that. Create an environment, because studies show that certain environments foster happy emotions and certain environments don't. So when you're walking down the street and you see more greenery, the studies actually show that people do better in neighborhoods where there's some greenery, things like that. So what we do is we get involved in every area, because inequities are infused in every area. So we have to wake up and do our part in infusing equity into every level of a person's life, from the cradle to transition.
All
I
right.
want to.
Jacqueline Morris also said, she shared that Black men are under a silent pressure, but then she says that many African American women are functionally depressed. So thank you, Jacqueline, for sharing your thoughts and your concerns on that just as well. Tina Hammond is here and she says hello to everyone. Hey, Tina, how are you? Irma Mayfield is here and she's saying hello to everyone. Tina is also saying truth. That's so truthful. Well, Melinda Maxwell says it's a lot of times it doesn't come from the home. Anger can stem from those people outside of you. Trust, and they turn cold on some. They search for any help but fall at the devil's feet. And, Dr. Miller brought that up a little earlier when he talked about the hurt and the pain that happens. Jacqueline is also sharing the basic needs. Absolutely. Flo Strong is here. And she says, good day, Nikki, please check your, okay, I got you. I was about to read your whole message. That should have been a little private, but I got you. I will check it tomorrow about Trinity Advocate Hospital. Thank you, Audrey. But thank you, Flo. And Flo, chime in on this conversation. Flo is an outstanding retired nurse from the VA, and she used to have a lot of these conversations along with a lot of our veterans who suffered from the same suicidal tendencies that we are talking about. Audrey J. Cox is here. She says, late but here. Good evening to everyone. Go right ahead, Dr. Miller.
Yeah, no, I just like to make certain that before we wrap up, we look at things from this perspective. If everything was ideal and we had choices of resources and that the resources that we need were plentiful, then the answer would be different. That is not the situation that we're in. And so the question is that given the situation that we're in, where resources are limited, choices are narrow, what can we do? I'm not just, when I say we, I'm talking about we community, yeah, we next door neighbors to each other. What can we do as neighbors to each other that to contribute to the resolution and solution of some of these things? Because like one of the things that Dr. Pete mentioned, that the church is the people. We are the church. The people are the church. So what is it that we can do and should do, and how can we do that to with just dealing with what we have, not what we're dreaming about, but what we actually have?
Yeah, I think I appreciate that, Dr. Miller. Not to pie in the sky kind of like, what are we doing right now, tomorrow, tonight? I do think we need to bring anybody in your immediate circle, any young person in your immediate circle. You will be surprised at the wisdom that we have. And I think sometimes we don't believe that there's wisdom that you have. Not, you don't need to go read some fancy article or some book. Wisdom that you have from, right, of how we survived from down south, things, stories that your mom told you, stories that your father told you, um, of how we made it over. These kids need to hear that. They don't hear that from anybody. What they're hearing is nonsense from these social media apps, right? And the minute they hear a nonsense, those apps have algorithms and it keep feeding them nonsense. And so we have to break that cycle by telling them some common sense, some real life common sense that mama and auntie and all of them shared with us that allowed us to be where we are. And what that does briefly is it allows them to make better choices because now there's some other opposing view that says, well, wait a minute, this person didn't come up with that from nowhere, right? And this person obviously has a vested interest in my um, survival and thrival and things like that. So it at least allows them to have something to say. Here's a skill set that they gave me to make better choices, right? Even down to, here's my phone number. If you have questions, if you have any concerns, you feel pressure, you feel stress, call me, text me, because I know kids don't want to call you, but they'll text. Text me. If you're feeling like you don't know what to do, you don't have to make a decision right away. Just call me. Just even saying that, just being able to reach out to some of these young people, they really want us to do that. They really want us to do that. And guess what? It's incumbent upon us to do that. We can't wait for them to call to reach out to us because, again, this might be a generation that has never seen a positive Black male role model in their life. Really, 77% of households are raised by Black women by themselves. So they've never seen me. Like I'm like a foreign entity. So I have to introduce myself to them to say, hey, I'm here for you. I'm rooting for you, right? And here's my number. Call me if you have any questions. If you want to be a doctor, cool. If you don't want to be one, cool. But if you have a question about life, and you're concerned about if you can afford. I met a young kid that was going into physical therapy, and somebody wanted me to talk to him because they thought he could be a doctor or whatever. And I met with the kid in Hyde Park, and I told him, I said, I'm not here to make you want to be a doctor. I said, I'm here to let you know that I'm rooting for you, no matter what you want to do. I certainly want you to be a doctor, but I'm like, I want you to be whatever you're supposed to be. So here's my number. Let's stay in touch. He just texted me today, actually, thanking me for meeting with him. Now, again, I think we got to do that. I think that's the one thing, Dr. Miller, you said right now, reach out to any kid that's in your circle that's within arm's reach of you. Now, certainly if you're a part of organizations that are doing it, if you're a part of your church, join the youth ministry, all the rest of that, that's a no-brainer. We should do that. If you're a member of the Alphas, go to our Alpha Light program, become involved in that. But also right away, anybody that's within arm's length, we all know some kid who everybody's like, oh, little Jimmy's good at science. I want you to talk to him. All right, so now talk to little Jimmy, because next time you see little Jimmy, he may not be there. So we have to make sure that little Jimmy is making good decisions, making good choices, so that he can be anything he wants to be. But our kids are really starving for good advice and people that care about them, that don't have an ulterior motive with dealing with them, because we don't know what these kids are going through. To Dr. Maya's point, she started off with this, with the ACE scores. These kids are going through a lot of trauma in the house. And we found this out during COVID, when these kids were at home when we really school used to break the trauma cycle. Now all of a sudden, when parents, I'm sorry, when teachers were looking in the background of these kids' houses and saw some of the stuff that these kids were going through, then we got a window, an eye view. Oh my goodness. This is why that kid can't sit still, and why we saw it. The teachers were reporting it, like, the mama, a lot of stuff was going on. So the point is, let's reach out to our children, be there as a resource. I don't know if anybody else have anything to share.
Well, Sam Clear says we have to start one block, one neighborhood at a time, surge resources at a priority neighborhood and build it up, and then surge on the next block and the next neighborhood. We have to work together to make an impact. Together, each achieves more. And that's the acronym for team. So I want to say thank you so much, Mr. Clear, for that. Thank you so very much for sharing that. Pam Blackman is here with us just as well, and she's the president of the Better Boys Foundation, which is a historic foundation that has been around, and she just wanted to share the fact that they have great resources for our youth. And she says that sometimes they actually just go underutilized. They have personal mindset, planning for success, social awareness, verbal communication, and problem solving. So she says if there are any questions, if you have a youth that wants to be a part, whether they are troubled or not, she's also looking for youth mentors. To meet her at 1512 South Pulaski Road over at the Better Boys Foundation. Also, I Am Able, one of our favorites, our very own Dr. Carolyn Vessel. She says she has those same great programs just as well, and she would like to, give you some choices, and you can meet her over at I Am Able. And at I Am Able, they can do some mental health evaluations and assessments to see where you fall in. They also work in collaboration with the Better Boys Foundation, and they work together to make sure that they can build community. So I definitely wanted to share those two resources that they were sharing with us on this evening. So, Dr. Miller?
Yeah, so I want to thank Sam Clear. That's my brother. I think that one of the things I was having a discussion week before last, and we were just talking about the same situation in terms of what's happening to our youth. And during that discussion, the point came that there are funds available to help that group of youth that they call at risk, which are between the ages of 16 and I think 20 or 24 or something of that nature. Now, and that's great. I'm glad of that. But what I think also is, again, I'm about preventing. If we don't do something about those that are less than 16, we're just going to continue to clear the pot and throw some more in the fire. And that doesn't solve the problem. We need to fix the ones that are in the fire. And then we need to create an environment and supply the things that we can supply that will prevent those younger children from getting into the point that they have to end up in that fire. Because if we don't, all we're doing is just recycling. we're just pulling, we're just burning and bringing more into the fire. That doesn't solve anything. It doesn't heal the community at all. And when we're looking for healing, we have to be looking for prevention, and we have to prevent these kids from getting to the point that they're in that at risk. I mean, sure, they might be in the age, a group of at risk, but they don't have to be at risk if they receive we talked about the soil. If the soil is, if we know that they are not in fertile soil, we have to do what we need to do. In gardening, sometimes, I remembered when I began gardening, and the first year I had a bumper crop of tomatoes. And after about the second or third year, I started noticing that there were some problems with my tomatoes. Well, I grow in a grow pot, which means that it's above the ground. So the only soil is in there is the soil that I put in there. And if I don't put the nutriments in there, it's not coming from flowing from anywhere else. And so what I'm saying is that we have to make certain that we are putting the necessary thing in the right places where we are raising our children. That the tools, the nutriments, the things that are necessary to grow a healthy child, a child that can be successful in dealing with life, a child that can handle some of the life is going to come with stresses. Now, the Bible says that every man born of a woman, days are few, and they're going to be filled with trials and tribulations. So the trials and tribulation are going to come. It isn't. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about how do we prepare and how do we help to make certain that we can get through the trials and tribulation. And so I want to thank everybody for what the contribution that has been made tonight. And I just think that we need to figure out how we can come together to strengthen our community, strengthen our neighborhoods, and strengthen each other. This is not a walk by ourselves. We're walking together. And when I look at a change is only as strong as its weakest link. So we have to strengthen every link in the chain in order for it to be able to call this a strong chain.
Absolutely. Well, Laura Leone is here and she says, good evening. Dwayne Banks is here. Latanya Mitz is here. And so is Melanie. Hey, Melanie, how are you? She's here. Wooly Potts Campbell is here and she says, thank you for being here. Theor Humphrey is here. The Pastor Kyles, both Pastor Crystal Kyles and her husband are both here and they're saying thank you just as well. We have an inbox question and this will be our last question for the evening. And she says, thank you, Deacon Miller, for your comments. And I really appreciate your transparency. You talk about soil. Well, that soil is us, the adults. So we have to remain transparent and honest. And I thank you so much, Congressman Davis, for always being that transparent elected official who we could always depend on. But Dr. Miller, I have a question. How do we deal with those in the workplace who are toxic and demented, filled with the devil? No matter what we do, even pray, they keep up trouble. What do we do?
That's an interesting question. But you know what? And I'm going to put it like this: as a doctor, when I see a disease, I don't get angry at the disease. I figure out ways to manage it, ways to cure it. And so, so we can't, when we deal with a sick person who's toxic, they're sick. They have something going on with them somewhere in their lives, in their personality, in their spirit. So we got to really look at trying to find the solution to the disease that's affecting that person. Then, let's solve the problem. Don't look at the discomfort and the displeasure that they bring, but look beyond that, because in them somewhere there's probably a good person. We just got to move the other stuff out of the way.
Well, that's a whole mouthful right there, Dr. Willis. That's a whole mouthful. That's a lot of looking.
Gotta look hard now.
Take a lot. I don't know if I got them many eyes on my glasses. With that being said, we're going to go around the table and until next Monday, because I know you guys hate to hear me say this because our hour has neared. But Pete, I'm going to ask really quickly. We are in the midst of a measles outbreak, and I know this is Couch Conversations with the Doctors, and we're always talking about everything that affects us physically and mentally, but we want to give an update about the measles. Pete, are you prepared tonight? I know Dr. Maya has to jump off. Are you prepared tonight just to give us a little update on the measles outbreak and how people can protect themselves?
Yeah. So, measles is a virus that most Americans, due to their job or school, has had a vaccine for. It's called an MMR. So most people are vaccinated. There's a small minority of people that's not. There are some people who have immune problems or immune disorders where their vaccine, their immunity may have worn off, and so you may want to check in with your doctor to see if they can check your immunity for MMR, as measles, mumps, and rubella. But it's a virus. You remember when we were kids, you would get the red papules on your skin. and you get a high fever. So if you have a high fever, skin rash, you can have a sore throat. Again, it's like classic viral symptoms, but just with a very angry looking rash. I don't know if you remember this when you were kids, but a very angry looking rash. And in many cases, it's self-limiting. For some, self-limiting meaning it's not going to, cause any damage to you. There are some people that can develop an infection in their brain or like a pneumonia. Um, but those are people who have a very damaged immune system due to maybe cancer treatment or cancer. Maybe they're on immunosuppressant drugs for a rheumatological disorder or something. So those people have to be careful. But in many cases, many people are immune due to the fact that they had the vaccine. If you don't know if you're immune or not, you should go to your doctor, ask to have an MMR drawn on you to see. We are seeing a rise in these cases, and we don't exactly know why, but we think it could be due to some of the new arrivals who have not received the their vaccines, and they're staying in very close quarters. Measles is very, very contagious, so we want to make sure that if you work in the public, um, you want to make sure you're wearing your mask, wear your gloves. Y'all know the drill. but but yeah, so that's basically what it is. Again, many people have no reason to overly be worried or anything like that, because you've had it and you have immunity, or you've had the vaccine and you have immunity, and it's self-limiting. Even if you do get it, it's self-limiting. It your immune system fights it off. There are some people, very, very rare, that can develop the lung infection and the brain infection, encephalitis and meningitis. But those are people who are very, very sick already with a number of health concerns that's going on. So that's it. I don't know if my colleagues want to say anything else on that.
Other than, I think you addressed the point, which is the problem is that most of the time when we have an outbreak of anything, most people get concerned about it, especially something that we've not been seeing.
Yeah.
But I think you made the point that most of us probably don't have to worry about it because we've been vaccinated already. And as we're seeing it in some of the immigrants who may not have been vaccinated, and so exposure in those people, they have no immunity, so it becomes they manifested the problems. The virus is looking for a willing and a host that it can live in. And so if you're immune already, you're not that host. So your system will stop it. But if you've not been vaccinated, or you have a disease, or you're on medication that does suppress that immune system, now you may become a host. So if you're in that situation, certainly you should you want to check with your doctor to make certain that everything that's being done to protect you is done, and that you know what to look for and what to avoid.
Outstanding. Want to say thank you to Dr. Miller and Dr. Pete for their great update. Want to say hey to Evelyn Green, who's here from CDPH, who says thank you just as well, and to Dr. Ige, who is the commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health. I want to say thank you, and I had a great time with you on last Thursday, so I want to say thank you just as well. Well, our until next Mondays. Pete, why don't you start us off? Your until next Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say until next Monday, just recognize that to Dr. Green's point, there are children that have gone through and maybe still going through a significant amount of childhood trauma. And that trauma, if unaddressed, can set them up for an early death due to literally physical health problems. So just wrap your brain around that the trauma, the mental health trauma that a child goes through, if unaddressed, they will eventually die early from some chronic health problem, either high blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, whatever it is. They'll die earlier. Now, not to mention the risk of the things I talked about, which was suicide attempts and mental health challenges and anxiety, depression. So just wrap your brain around. If we don't do something, and yes, doing something might mean alerting a teacher, um, um, reaching out to the child to say, hey, or to the school to say, hey, if kids are having challenges, here's the 1-800 suicide number. Like literally put that number in your phone. You can Google it. Put that number in your phone. There's a 77% increase in suicide attempts among young Black men. That's unprecedented. We're seeing declining suicide rates of every other culture with the exception of Black men. So now the suicide attempt might be somebody going 80 miles per hour down a side street, right? That's an attempt on his life and yours too, by the way. So we have to do something. To Dr. Miller's point, don't look at nobody else. What can you do right now? And to me, that's reach out to anybody that's in arm's length of you. And until next Monday, please reach out to somebody within arm's length. Check on the strong people. Check on them. Call them. Hey,
That's
you all right?
That's that
Right.
part. That part
Yeah.
right there. Check on the strong people. That
Check on
part.
the strong people, because sometimes they ain't so strong. They
That part.
put that persona on there, but they need your help too. That's
That
it.
cape.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Want to remind you, Pete brought up a great resource. Want to remind you guys of the Federal Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 988. Just simply dial those three numbers, 988, save it in your phone under your SMS text messages, 988, and share that number. Remember to share that number. Yolanda Williams says the best Monday night event ever. We appreciate you all. This past pandemic, we appreciate you. You are just what the community needs. Well, Doug, you're until next Monday.
Well, two things. One, I want to congratulate the Congressman again on a victory that was really well earned and well deserved. But I want to build on what Dr. Pete said. In my study of gun violence, you cannot detect that people are going to commit suicide by killing themselves with a gun 50% of the time. So his solution about reaching out and making the connections is really critical. And I think that's vital to answering Dr. Miller's questions about how to reduce the violence among children. You have to make those connections. So thumbs up to Pete.
Absolutely. Pete says check on the strong people. Dr. Graham says to check on people and keep it going. Well, Dr. Miller, you're until next Monday.
Yeah. So until next Monday, my message is don't look for the answer outside of you. Look for the answer within you, because you have the answer. You just gotta use it. You are one ingredient that is needed, an important one. So make certain that you look in and that you give yourself to the cause.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just want to remind everyone COVID is still real. And yes, there is a small spike in COVID right now, as Dr. Pete and all of our doctors share all the time. If you feel that you are in a room and you have not achieved herd immunity there, to please just remember to wear a mask. Also, make sure that you wash your hands thoroughly. That is so important. We are aware that there is a little spike going on, but we can get through this one just as well if we wear a mask, wash our hands, and if you need to get your updated booster, please go to any of our FQHCs and make sure that you do so. I know we got a ton of questions about RSV. We will prepare to answer a lot of your questions and maybe have a conversation about it just as well. Well, Congressman, take us home.
Well, it's been so exciting to listen to all of the instructions, and I want to thank everybody for their input. I'm a firm believer that if you find happiness within, the manifestation is without. And if individuals could learn to, first of all, love themselves and be happy, you'll be in good shape. And I think many of our children, as they are growing up, they never learn to be happy and to really enjoy themselves. And if you learn that and learn to do that, I'll make one little point of good news For several years, my staff and I have been working to try and have Social Security money that is due to foster children to be given to those children in some way. And we have discussed with governors, we've discussed with internal revenue people, social security directors, all kind of people. And we finally have a social security director who seems to be pretty much agreeing and has agreed that foster children, when they age out, often have nothing to carry them over. I'm saying you are an adult now. And so you no longer have the protection of the state. You don't have a payee. You're grown. Go get it. We have gotten them around to the point where we've almost been assured that we're going to see some of this money either put into a trust fund so that when these children age out, they've got a nest egg, or they may get some of it even while they're still underage. I think my point is only that change oftentimes comes from constant struggle, and that if you keep working at it, you keep working at it. I think someone told me when I was a kid, if one drop of water fell on a piece of wood for 10 years, that wood will be destroyed. Just one drop, one drop. And if you've got the determination and the discipline, so don't be dismayed when our young people don't seem to behave a certain way. But if you keep working on them, keep working with them, and have enough discipline to do it, ultimately you will break through and you will see some amazing differences. So I guess all I'd really say is keep working. Thank you all. It's been a delightful evening, and just keep working. Keep working. It'll be all right. Have a good evening. Thank you.